after I'm president. We must assert. We have to assert our values and reconcile our principles as a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws. That's a priority that I will pursue from my very first day. And we can do something more. We can tear down the barriers that keep the American dream out of the reach for so many Americans.
Hi, everybody. One of the remarkable things about America is that nearly all of our families originally came from someplace else. We're a nation of immigrants. Together, all of you remind us that America is and always has been a nation of immigrants.
Thank you for your question. And let me step back and tell you what I'd like to do with our immigration policy broadly and include an answer to your question. First of all, this is a nation of immigrants.
Was Lorraine, we are a nation of immigrants. And now, as president, this celebration is a perfect reminder of the many cultures and faiths that make us who we are as Americans. We're a nation of immigrants. Our vast array of traditions and perspectives and backgrounds, our melting pot, is what makes America unique. Immigration makes us stronger. It keeps us vibrant, it keeps us hungry, it keeps us prosperous. It is part of what makes this such a dynamic country. For just as we remain a nation of laws, we have to remain a nation of immigrants.
President Barack Obama says 25 foreign-born service members who became U.S. citizens on the 4th of July are vivid reminders that America is and always has been a nation of immigrants. He says it's that rich diversity that makes the country the best in the world.
And to ignore them is to ignore America's legacy and roots. We are a nation of immigrants.
We're a nation of immigrants, and we're also a nation of laws.
You know, when we speak of immigration, the first thing that comes to mind is we are a nation of immigrants.
Well, you know, we have a real strong history of immigration in this country.
A nation of immigrants is a celebration of America's story. The vitality, the energy, the entrepreneurial skills, the courage, the risk-taking, and the values of family and faith.
I think it's crucial that we all learn in this country the importance of welcoming and accepting the diversity that we have and the extent to which that makes us a stronger country.
Immigrants are more fertile.
We're a nation of immigrants, and we must uphold that tradition, which has strengthened our country in so many ways.
You know, this whole anti-immigrant sentiment that's out there in our politics right now is contrary to who we are. Because unless you are a Native American, your family came from someplace else. I mean, it's really important for us to remember our history. You know, unless you're one of the first Americans, a Native American, you came from someplace else. Somebody brought you.
We are not a nation of immigrants. That is no longer true. There was a time back when this was still the frontier or was converting from the frontier that this was a nation of immigrants. But today, the vast majority of all Americans that are here were born here. Their parents are born here. Their families have been here for generations. We have 315 million people in this country, and they didn't just arrive. This is no longer a nation of immigrants.
That's another thing that kind of bothers me a little bit about that whole Native American thing. You know, this nation of immigrants business, you know, we are not We're not a nation of immigrants. 85 to 87% of the people that live in the United States were born here. You know what that makes us? It makes us Native Americans. We are Americans by birth. National Geographic had this big story, now some evidence that the Native American tribes, the Indian nations, migrated here from Eurasia as well as from Asia. Well, what does that mean? I mean, they don't even stop to kind of contemplate the significance of that. It means that Native American tribes are immigrants too. If we're a nation of immigrants, to use their expression, that has to apply to the Indian nations that were here when European settlers arrived.
America was to be the great experiment, a testing ground for political liberty, a model for democratic government. And although the first task was to mold a nation on these principles here in this continent, to realize that we are the descendants of 40 million people who left other countries, other familiar scenes, to come here to the United States to build a new life, to make a new opportunity for themselves and their children. I think it is not a burden, but a privilege to have the chance to share that great concept among all of our people, to make this really, as it was for them, a new world for us, and indeed for all those who look to us. That is what this organization has stood for 50 years. That's what this country has stood for 200 years. And that's what this country will continue to stand for.
As he prepared to sign a bill at Ellis Island, President Lyndon B. Johnson gave a short speech to those that had come to witness the signing.
This bill that we will sign today is not a revolutionary bill. It does not affect the lives of millions. It will not reshape the structure of our daily lives or really add importantly to either our wealth or our power.
He could not have been further from the truth. The bill he signed was the Hart-Celler Immigration Bill, also known as the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965.
In the early 20th century, we had very high levels of immigration, sometimes more than 1 million a year. And it was those high levels of immigration, mostly at that time from Southern and Eastern Europe, that prompted policymakers by 1921 and 1924 to put into place the national origins quota system.
In 1952, the immigration system was modified again by the McCarran-Walter Act. Under this act, European immigrants were given a yearly quota of 149,667 people, while Asian and African immigrants faced quotas of 2,990 and 1,400 people, respectively. Representative Celler, himself the grandson of immigrants and a strong opponent of the 1924 Immigration Act, had once said that one of the things he cared about passionately was immigration law.
People who opposed the immigration policy of 1965 to a good extent wanted to keep the ethnic makeup of America consistent and without any drastic changes. The policymakers moved ahead with pretty defined goals to end the national origins quota system and to put in place a system of family reunification. But they missed parts of the story that would become important elements of this policy in the years ahead. For instance, they did not foresee the demographic trends that were just beginning to take shape.
Under the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, immigration from the Eastern Hemisphere had a total quota of 170,000, with no more than 20,000 per country. Immigration from the Western Hemisphere was limited to 120,000, with no national quotas at all. The new system gave preference to immigrants with family ties with those in the U.S.
By 1964, 1965, led by the example of the African American civil rights movement, the majority of the government came to the conclusion that it's time to get rid of racial discrimination and do everything on a race-neutral basis. This was, in the political arena, an overwhelmingly popular bill.
The immediate result of the new system was a drastic change in the size and composition of incoming immigrants. The passage of the Hart-Celler Act increased overall immigration. The backgrounds of the immigrants entering the U.S. changed as well. In 1900, Asians made up about 1.2% of immigrants, but by 1990 that number had changed to about 25%. Hispanic immigration over the same time period changed from 1.3% to 43% of total immigration to the U.S. Meanwhile, European immigrants as a percentage of total immigration decreased from 83% to 22%. The overall increase in immigration levels did change American demographics, contrary to the predictions of lawmakers at the time. Between 2000 and 2010, new immigrant arrivals and immigrant children accounted for 80% of population growth. And much of this has to do not only with increased immigration numbers, but also higher fertility rates among immigrants. The percentage of foreign-borns in the U.S. was 6.9% in 1950, but rose to 12.9% by 2010 as a result of the new policies. Racial minorities accounted for the majority of U.S. births in 2010, according to that year's census data. And some demographers say that non-Hispanic whites could become a minority by the middle of the century. The demographical change that the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 caused has had drastic implications for American politics.
First, he marched in Paris for free speech. Millions of French people and world leaders were supporting intercultural unity. Then Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán went home to declare that immigration to Europe should be largely halted. He's called for migration curbs in the past. Now Orbán says it's time for Brussels to get tough. Economic migration is a bad thing in Europe, he says. We should not look at it as something useful because it only means trouble and danger to the European people. Migration should be stopped. That's Hungary's opinion. We don't want to ingest a significant minority with a cultural nature and background that's different from ours. We would like to keep Hungary Hungarian.